Even though tags and regs are definitely better than fish, they still have plenty of leaks in their game. And today I want to go through a situation where a tag makes two massive mistakes in a single hand, so you can both A, not make that mistake yourself, and B, be on the lookout for other tags and regs in your game that are making these similar mistakes so you can take advantage of them. Let's jump right into it. Alright, so this is a hand played at 1-2 over at Orange City, and I'll leave a link for the full vlog episode down below if you're interested. But essentially our opponent is under the gun. They are definitely considered more of a tag. They open to 6, and after a slew of callers look down at ace-jack off in the small blind and decide to squeeze, and just squeeze up to 40. Pretty typical, pretty standard. I know quite a few players will prefer to flat this instead, but not actually one of the mistakes I want to talk about specifically in this video, but consider it a bonus one. A lot of players, especially tags, will call with hands that they should actually be squeezing or 3-betting with preflop. This is a prime example of one of those hands. So after thinking for a while, we run into mistake number 1 from typical tags, and that is calling this 3-bet too wide. So instead of waiting till the end for the results, I'm actually just going to show you right here. Our opponent had pocket 7s in this situation, so that way you can see exactly what they did throughout this hand. And calling with 7s here is just way too wide. It's like, what are you really going to do in this situation? It's putting in way too much of your starting stack just to try to catch a set, and whether it goes heads up or it goes multi-way, you're not like super thrilled with most situations that aren't exactly a set on the flop. So mistake number 1 is tags that are definitely calling far too wide against 3-bets and squeezes preflop, and really just far too wide in general preflop. This is something that is going to cost you a lot because you're going to lose a lot of small to medium sized preflop pots, and it's just going to add up in the long run, especially when you really don't have much of a plan or idea on how you can possibly turn that into profit other than just smashing the flop. So after a while, the button calls as well as the early position player, so we go 4-way to the flop, and the flop is Jack 7-6 with 2 diamonds. So at this point in the game, I decide to continuation bet, and I choose a small 33, which I'm totally fine with overall. These kind of smaller c-bet sizes in 3-bet and squeeze pots are quite standard, so I'm okay with it overall. Might be a tad small, maybe it could be 40, but I'm not going to get too much into that right this moment. And after a little while, we face a raise up to, I believe, 108 total from EP1, and let's just pause it right here, because this is going to be mistake number 2. Now keep in mind the tag has pocket 7s here, right? So they are super strong, and raising with a strong hand is totally fine overall, but what does raising accomplish right this moment? Because if I am sitting here as the preflop squeezer, as the preflop aggressor, who also decides to continuation bet in a multi-way pot, if I have a really strong hand, queens plus, you're probably going to get most of my money most of the time anyway. So what does the raise really accomplish other than just putting all the money in right this moment as opposed to delaying it further? Number 2 is that you're kind of allowing the other players to play quite close to perfect, especially the button who does have a stack, whereas the under the gun +1 player doesn't, so it's not much of a concern for that player. It's kind of a foregone. And again, are you just letting people play too close to perfect? And that's really the mistake at the end of the day, is that tags, especially tags that can be a little bit more nervous about losing big pots, will oftentimes take these lines that allow their opponents to play totally perfectly. Now, if I'm in a situation like this where I'm considering folding something like ace-jack, right? One of the strongest hands in my range. Sure, I have queens plus as well, but ultimately, like, my strongest non-pair like that is going to be exactly ace-jack. And if I'm even considering folding that, one, that means you might have a profitable bluff opportunity, but you're probably not taking that bluff. Instead, you're probably just taking these where you're raising with the nuts, which is great, but you're probably letting me play too close to perfect. And if that's the case, you could be leaving hundreds of dollars on the table if I decide to find the fold button somewhere along the way. And hint, I do in this situation, and I'm dead right by doing so. So not only does raising allow my strong hands to possibly play much closer to perfect, but you also don't allow me to make any mistakes when I have things like ace-king or ace-queen or bluffs or any of that weird stuff. You're just kind of allowing me to play too close to perfect with every part of my range, and that is a serious problem. And part of that is just that you probably don't have enough bluffs in your overall raising range here, and 2 is, again, against someone who's even slightly competent who is able to find that fold button when, again, you have really no lightness in your overall raising range, you're just letting them play too close to perfect every single time. Versus versus call here. And if they have queens plus, you're probably going to get paid on turns. And if they have air, you give them a chance to consider double barreling or shoving the turn or whatever, versus raising here. And where's my motivation to like bluff 3-bet here ever? Like, I don't expect that's going to work if I'm sitting here with ace king instead of ace jack. Like, why would I decide to 3-bet punt it there? Like, I don't assume there's any fold equity. Again, it's just not doing anything good for you. So continuing on with this hand, there is a call by the under the gun +1 player, and the button folds, and here we are with ace jack. And I think let's take a moment and just run a little bit of math on this just to see how bad this commitment might actually be. So one of the tools we can use for this is my all-in EV spreadsheet, and we're just going to simplify this a little bit. It's not quite fair, but this is essentially going to solve for pure commitment, right? That there's no folding, that our opponent is raising a range that they are 100% committed with, and that these are the overall numbers. It cheats a little bit just because there would be a side pop, but at the end of the day, it's totally fine and usable as a starting point. So pot size before calling right this moment is 349. How much do we have to call is 217. Again, if we're getting into this with a commitment mindset, assuming that there's no fold equity whatsoever, and then we need our equity when we do call. So to get your equity, you can use any tool like Equilab or Poker Cruncher. I'm just going to use Flopzilla Pro for this because I already have everything plugged in. So this is our hand right here. This is our opponent's range, the tags, and then this is the other person. So the tag, again, we're just assuming that their raising range is everything they're going to commit with. There's no fold equity whatsoever. So essentially, what are they raising with a commitment mindset here? And if we assume that's just over pairs or better and we lock that in, notice up here what that does to our equity. It tanks down miserably down to 7%, which is not particularly good. If we go back to the spreadsheet and plug that in right here, equity when called at 7%, our total EV is -177 on a commitment here with our ace jack, which is pretty darn brutal. So if we were back here in Flopzilla and we're like, okay, maybe it's not that bad, maybe there's also some flush draws and top pair. I don't think there's really any top pair in that range, but you notice we get a little bit of a pop up to roughly 10%, but even if we throw that in, obviously this is still going to be negative EV and not great. We really need our opponent to be having some bluffs in here, and chances are they just don't have that. Even when they have flush draws in there, it's just not going to be enough for us to be in a commitment mindset because of the way that they're constructing their range, which is overall a mistake. Because if I'm in this spot with ace jack and I can consider quite heavily and quite confidently folding even with such a small SPR, that is really not a good sign that you are constructing your stuff properly, and you're probably letting me play too close to perfect. Now, of course, you can make the argument that if I start overfolding here with things like this, that you can start bluffing me with massive profitability. Totally fair, but I don't think that's the case, and not what most live tags especially are doing. So again, this is a really important one. Make sure you understand both of these mistakes and don't make them yourself, because they will cost you massively in the long run. But make sure that you're looking for other opponents in your game that do make these kind of mistakes, because they can be quite lucrative and profitable for you. And just for the record, if you're interested in finding even more leaks and mistakes that a lot of tags in your games are making, I would highly suggest doing my PostFlop workbook. Definitely make sure to do the entire workbook step by step. If you're interested, you can find more and pick up your copy today at splitsuit.com/postflop. Again, splitsuit.com/postflop. And that is going to wrap it up for this video. Thank you so much for hanging out today. And by the way, if you have other leaks or mistakes that you're noticing in tags in your game, make sure to leave a comment down below. Let other players know what you're finding and seeing, and I'd be happy to jump in the conversation as well. So make sure to leave a comment right away, and of course a thumbs up if you enjoyed this video. That's going to wrap it up for now. Hopefully you enjoyed. If you need anything, let me know. Otherwise, good luck out there and happy grinding.